some of the armoury or weaponry that they use in bloody battles, like pikes, spikes, nasty things like halberds and all these other pickaxes, an extremely brutal means of warfare. Defeated Edward and took control for a while and put back the insane king Henry VI, who were captured here. And Gaveston might well have been one of them while he was awaiting his show trial and jail. I happen to be standing outside or at the entrance to what is known as Warwick Castle. Now, Warwick Castle has thousands of, well, at least 1,000. Warwick itself, rather, has 1,000 or at least 1,000 years of history attached to it. It was actually discovered or founded or set up in 914 or 15 by an empress during the Saxon dynasty, or the Saxon era, rather, as a means to for refuge or protection. Now, it wasn't until 1068, after William the Conqueror's success at the Battle of Hastings, which he won and was crowned king at Westminster Abbey on Christmas Day, 1066, yes, he established the castle, which you can see down here is the mound, there is the motte, and the walls. It's a typical, one of the one of the finest medieval structures that are still completely standing, and the battlements and the curtain or the bailey wall, and below the motte is the forecourt. Not the forecourt, no, the moat rather. Anyway, because as you can see, what brought me here is not the fact that it's the apex of an easy way to get around England, north, south, east, west, and during 1068, among the castles that William first put up were the 800. This was one of them, Warwick, and he put it up because he, as a means to defend himself, but he never had to use it in that way. And of course, it was occupied and owned by his immediate subjects, the nobles, the earls, and the barons, who offered him and the kings of England thereafter their support, and in return he gave them his patronage. So let's just wander in through the entrance.
Let's have a look at a map.
So here we have the main entrance, which is the portcullis. Now this is where all the barons and the knights and the servants and the host of the Earl, or whoever was acting Earl of Warwick at the time, would come riding in or clattering in on their horses, and the knights. Because of course, you know, the medieval age was the age of chivalry, and the culture at the time was that they respected the legends of King Arthur and Mort Arthur, and the age. It was the age of chivalry, valor, and of course brutal warfare. So let's continue. Here we have at the side of the main entrance two typical shields that weren't metal but were constructed of wood, and you can see some of the armoury or weaponry that they use in bloody battles, like pikes, spikes, nasty things like halberds and all these other pickaxes, an extremely brutal means of warfare to of course to conquer whoever or whichever opposing force happened to be, and just to maintain their lust for power and influence. Yes, that's it. Now, what we're doing now is we're standing in the forecourt, the main court of the castle. Now, this would have been at the time used to stable horses, to cook. The kitchens would have been in here, and a lot of people would be hustle and bustle. And this courtyard would have been a means by which that would have happened. And of course we have surrounds of the interior of the grounds. Just let's pan around a little bit, and then we've got the top. In this room here, the rooms, little is left of anything that existed before the 18th century or the 19th century, which the castle passed to the later Earls of Warwick called Grenville, and they were the family that took over the castle and restored it and paid a lot of money and were extremely extravagant, not only in terms of restoring and maintaining the castle, but also in terms of entertainment and Christmas gatherings and just basically using the castle to splurge a lot of money to have a good time. Well, why not? But that's what the castle was basically. The castle passed into the hands of. Not much events would have after the era of the Wars of the Roses and the Tudors, although the Stuarts. But in these rooms, I've noticed there's a lot of memorabilia attached to the Stuart era, from which existed from James the First from 1603 to Queen Anne. Now, Queen Anne has a room in here, and it's where she is supposed or was prepared for her to die there. Now, anyway, so there's a room there. Now, Queen Anne was absolutely one of the most successful monarchs in terms of statecraft and winning wars against the Catholic French, and that was because she gave a lot of patronage away to the Marlborough family, the Churchills, the Marlborough family, and it was the Duke of Marlborough's supreme commandership that won her a lot of battles against the French. But unfortunately for Anne, she only reigned for 12 years, and all the children, she had 17 children, and she just couldn't keep a male heir to succeed her, and that's why the crown eventually passed to the German clan, the Hanoverians. But enough of that. So unfortunately, all the 17 children that Anne had died. So it was a very unfortunate aspect of her reign. Yes, for 12-year reign. Okay, so let's go on then to walk around some of the courtyard, and you can see. So as most of the medieval era is completely lost, it just leaves it to your imagination to dream up what happened during the 11th century and 14th, 15th and 16th centuries, but particularly the medieval, which lasted from the Normans, the Plantagenet era, from the 11th century towards the end of the 15th century, when after Richard III was killed and the Tudors took over and controlled the crown for about 100 years after that, yes. Here we have some interesting architecture, towers, battlements, again the Bailey walls, walking around the courtyard here, and it really is a fascinating depiction or edifice of medieval architecture. I just find that the medieval aspect of history is a lot more colourful, more interesting than other aspects. It's the age of chivalry, the age of valour, and the age of war, and of course, being a tough. Well, no, not right. Being a monarch during the Middle Ages was pretty tough. You either were for the part of chivalry, valour, warfare, and could see off treachery and betrayal, or you weren't. Now, unfortunately, in the 1570s, a great conflict blew up between what was known as the houses of York and Lancaster, and Henry VI, the king at the time, which is difficult to imagine he was king because he wasn't a warrior king in any manner of means, and he was weak, and he was unfortunately also mentally unbalanced. So his wife, the French Queen Margaret of Anjou, controlled him. But then there was a big contender against the Lancastrians, which he represented the crown, by the House of York. So the houses of York and Lancaster, Richard, Duke of York, probably had a better claim. He had a better claim, a stronger claim to the crown than Henry VI himself, because he came from the earlier son of Edward III, who died in, oh my God, 18, sorry, I can't remember when he lived the year that he died. But anyway, he left a lot of sons, and there was a lot of dispute between who should inherit or had the rightful claim to the crown and the English throne. So it was quite a dramatic time in history. And anyway, Richard, Duke of York, conflicted against Henry VI, and eventually the Wars of the Roses rather ensued with the Battle of St Albans, and which the Yorkists won, but there wasn't any security until because Margaret of Anjou was a very determined lady, and she wouldn't give up fighting against Richard, Duke of York, although he had won the Battle of St Albans. So, to cut a long story short, she marched up to Scotland, gathered an army, and Richard, Duke of York pursued her there. But then in 1460, he got ambushed at one of his castles, at the castle of Sandal Castle, near Wakefield in York. And he got ambushed there and killed, and then Margaret, as a token of mockery, stuck his head with a paper crown on it on the top of Micklegate Bar in York, and so there you are. That's as far as you'll ever get to becoming King of England, So anyway, that's what happened there, but it wasn't her victory was short-lived, and then Edward, Earl of March, his eldest son, fought against the Lancastrians at the Battle of Mortimer's Cross first, and the bloodiest battle of all, Towton, which he won, and then after that, in support of Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick was crowned King of England, and Warwick was king in everything but name at the time, and That's why he was had the phrase coined. He was coined with the phrase of the title, the Kingmaker. Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick. This was obviously one of his strongholds, and the others would be the Neville strongholds north of here, one of which is Raby Castle, and in Yorkshire, in County Durham, and North Yorkshire you would have had territories which stretched across to the Welsh Marches, but this was probably one of his main headquarters of Warwick Castle, Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick. Now, if you go to here, so, now, once the Yorkists had got control of Edward, Earl of March, Edward IV was on the throne. Richard Neville wanted to establish an alliance with the French or the Flemish, or the French princess called Margaret of Savoy. Now, unfortunately, given Edward's character, he had other ideas. And rather than carry through Warwick's quite sensible policy of creating détente with one of the biggest enemies of England at the time, the French, he went off and married a commoner called Elizabeth Woodville, Lady Grey, or Countess, and but she was a real mismatch, because Edward just fell hopelessly in love with her because she was so beautiful that he obviously obsessed with her and worshipped the ground that she walked on. So unfortunately, he married her in secret behind Warwick's back, obviously, and of course Warwick, when he found out 6 months later, was absolutely furious, and this put him against Edward, and he changed sides, and then defeated Edward and took control for a while and put back the insane king Henry VI. Now, but Edward, of course, wasn't daunted being a kind of courageous, valorous character that he was, with the help of his brothers, Richard Duke of Gloucester, George Duke of Clarence, and Richard Duke of Gloucester. No, not Clarence. No, Clarence rebelled, but it was with the help of his younger brother, Richard Duke of, because Warwick got Clarence on his side, was Richard Duke of Gloucester, and a very loyal brother that he was. He invaded an army, and then defeated Warwick at the Battle of Barnet, just north of London, where Warwick was killed, which partly due to a fog which didn't work in his favour. So after the Battle of Barnet, when Warwick and his forces were killed, Edward took back the throne. But then the Yorkists the Lancastrians tried one last attempt, led by Margaret and their son Edward of Westminster, Prince of Wales, to try to get back the throne, but failed, and Edward was slain, and Margaret went to Tewkesbury. Margaret went back into exile, and then for 12 long years Edward reigned in peace. And that's it, basically, except that in 1483 Edward died, and then there was a big political upheaval once again, and Richard, because Edward's sons, he had 2 sons by Elizabeth Woodville, as well as 5 daughters, and the sons were known as the Princes in the Tower, but because they were found to be illegitimate, were barred from the succession, Richard took the throne. But unfortunately, due to the scheming machinations of the Lancastrian cause, Henry Tudor invaded from Brittany, France, rose up against Richard, and then gathered enough support, and poor Richard, despite the fact that he was a skilled knight, had a larger army, and was a skilled knight, and knew all, fought with his brother is certainly, I think, at Barnet and certainly at Tewkesbury, was killed by the adherents of, not by Henry Tudor, of course, because he couldn't fight a battle, to save himself, but it was his adherents, the Stanleys and the Tudor Welsh faction, who supported him, as well as the French. And Richard tried to made a cavalry charge against him, but he was cut down, intercepted, stopped and killed. So that's the end of the Plantagenet reign, and then we have the beginning of the Tudors. But this is Warwick Castle, folks, and it really is, to my opinion, an impressive artifice of medieval architecture that is still standing to this day. Anyway, I hope I haven't bored you too much or made a bit of a hash of the history narrative there. Anyway, thanks for watching this coverage. Now, I'm just going to read this plaque, which gives a summary of the fortunes of the House of Beauchamp, pronounced Beauchamp. Now, the history of the Beauchamp family is a tale of war, execution and chivalry, the plaque says. After the Norman conquest, he became a prominent family in the Marches, land separating the kingdoms of England and Wales. In the 13th century, House Beauchamp led Edward I's invasion of Wales. Yes, he conquered Wales and tried to conquer Scotland. Tried, but he failed because of the resilience of William Wallace and the Scots. But anyway, William Beauchamp, 9th Earl of Warwick, 1287 to 1298, defeated the last native Welshman to claim the title of Prince of Wales, Madog ap Llywelyn, in the Battle of Maydog of 1295. Through the marriage of his mother into the Newborough family, William Beauchamp became the 9th Earl of Warwick and owner of Warwick Castle in 1268. Warwick Castle was in a ruinous state at that time, probably because of the maybe several sieges that had taken place that had been barraged, attacked and damaged. The forces of Kenilworth Castle, not too far away from here, had slighted the north wall during the siege of 1264, leaving a breach where you currently stand today. Explore the story of how House Beauchamp restored and transformed the fortress of Warwick Castle through this trail. Right, now I'm just going to show you just some more features of the moat and the moat and the towers that exist, and some more architecture of the castle itself before we close.
The history of the Beauchamp family is a tale of war, execution, and chivalry. After Norman conquest, they became a prominent family in the Marches, separating the kingdoms of England, broke up into beautiful the Kingdoms of England and Wales. In the 13th century, House Beauchamp led Edward I's invasion of Wales. Yeah?
So I'm just going to pan again and just see and show what a marvellous structure the castle is from here. This is quite a good vantage point actually. So let's just look at some more information about the Beauchamps. The reconstruction of Warwick Castle began in the early 14th century after the Beauchamp family earned immense wealth from the wars against Scotland and Wales. The Beauchamp family had led Edward I's invasion of Wales. William Beauchamp defeated the last native Welshman to claim the title of Prince of Wales, Mab ap Llywelyn in the Battle of Barnet in 1295, contributing to the power and wealth of the family. Unlike most medieval castles, the Beauchamps never built a keep in the centre of the courtyard. Instead, they retained the motte and bailey layout of the castle, in which the keep was situated on the top of the mound. Whilst the castle walls were designed to be defensively impenetrable, the domestic range opposite included the Great Hall, the Earl's belongings and private kitchens. The domestic range was rebuilt in the 17th century, but the undercroft still survives from the 14th century. The stones along the top layer of the curtain wall were used to support wooden structures which were potentially used to house soldiers of the Earl's Guard.
How are they fired?
Okay, it's called the establishing, so how they consolidated their power and influence. Yeah, due to the patronage of by supporting Edward I, who in turn gave them patronage, yes. Now, this is an interesting story. The Black Hound, the tower you're about to enter, is named after one of Warwick Castle's most ruthless owners, Guy Beauchamp, 10th Earl of Warwick. Guy Beauchamp had been the leading magnate of King Edward I, but found himself in rebellion against the court of King Edward II. Guy Beauchamp had been displaced at court in favour of King Edward II's favourite, Piers Gaveston. Gaveston mocked Guy Beauchamp by nicknaming him the Black Hound of Arden for his uncontrollable anger. Guy responded but Gaveston by warning him to beware the bite of the Black Hound. In 1312, Guy Beauchamp and his fellow ordained seized Gaveston and placed him on trial. Yes, so Gaveston was imprisoned here, probably in the dungeons of the castle, but he was found guilty of treason in a show trial, and the barons committed judicial murder against him, and he was sentenced to death. So Gaveston was executed on the orders of Guy Beauchamp at Blacklow Hill, just a few miles or a few furlongs outside the town of Warwick. And later we'll go and have a look at Blacklow Hill, which so Gaveston caused a lot of internal conflict between the barons and the crown in the early 14th century.
How do we get over there? How do we get over? Should we have a look? Hello? Very careful. Come on. Have a light. You look at me. Come on.
It's too much.
How many little steps?
Telling me.
thing about this is that you can see.
Picture.
It would seem that we're at the topmost tower of Warwick Castle, so what we're going to do now is just pan around and look at the lie of the land, or the lie of the Warwick town, and it really looks quite impressive from here. So let's just pan around for a few moments.
I don't want to get too
Yes!
You see Mummy there, look.
Okay, don't run up.
I'm going to put the phone down, just wait.
We're here.
Right, Mummy's right here. Where? You see Mummy?
Jesus.
Shall we go down? This might be the way down, is it?
Can I grab my glasses, please?
Oh, it's nice and cold here, isn't it? Molly, where you going?
Right, so now we're gonna have to go all the way down.
Tennis field.
The only thing I can see is my torch.
Home. What we're looking at here is most likely a toilet where the prisoners who are captured here, and Gaveston might well have been one of them while he was awaiting his show trial. and jail, and you know, it's obviously you had to do their business somewhere, and it's extremely dark. This is the only place that you could possibly do any filming in this small confine, which is or was rather a prison.